everyone, and welcome back. It's Mindy with Mindy Egan Design, and today's video is going to be creating this really fun slider card using the Froggies stamp set and numerous dies from CC Designs. So I'm starting off here by just showing you kind of what I'm doing. I already stamped the frogs out on what I wanted to use, and this is just kind of the layout of what I'm going to do. There's the slider piece in there, some grass, and then I also used this stitched hillside from the Winter's Borders set. So I'm just laying this out to kind of give me an idea of what I want to do and where everything is going to sit. So what I want to start out with is I'm going to do all my ink blending first, and this is going to be for the grass. So I'm taking some Twisted Citron, and I'm just laying down some color, just kind of giving this some base, and then I'm going to come in with Lucky Clover. I'm really not worried about, if there's any marks on there, how well it's blending. I'm just getting this down because once it's cut out with the grass, you really can't tell either way. So I just got that base coat down, and I am using Bristol Smooth cardstock. It's just a really good cardstock to use for the Distress Oxides, and if you have just the Distress inks, Bristol Smooth is really good for that too. But for now I'm using the Oxides because they are kind of my go-to. So here I'm adding that Lucky Clover, kind of blending that in, letting that Twisted Citron kind of peek through a little bit to give it a little bit of a brighter look. And then I'm going to come back over that Lucky Clover with the Twisted Citron just to blend that out a little bit better. Since my inks were already out, I'm going to go ahead and create a background for my water because I wanted to have the froggies in a little pond. So I started out here with Mermaid Lagoon, one of my favorite blues out of the Distress Oxides. And I started out with faded denim oxide ink. As I did this, or I should say after I did it, I really wasn't happy with how the faded denim was looking. I didn't want it that dark. So I'm coming back over with the Mermaid Lagoon, blending that out a little better. Just trying to get that a little bit lighter because, like I said, it kind of was a little too cloudy looking for me, I guess you could say. I wanted it to be more of a spring and brighter type of card. So I did come in, I just happened to grab my Twisted Citron blending tool without putting any ink on there, and I threw that on the bottom, which was a really nice mix with that Mermaid Lagoon. It kind of gave me that nice aqua look, which I really liked. So then I came in with the Distress Sprayer and just spritzed some water on there to show some water droplets, and then I'll pick that up with a paper towel and just have those water spots on there. So once I have those done, I'm going to go ahead and die cut my pieces out. So like I said, I'm using the Winter Borders die for this. This is going to be my pond. And then I'm going to take that green inked up piece and I'm going to cut my grass from there. So I'll have my background pieces ready to start kind of assembling the card, giving me a better idea of where everything is going to sit. You can use some Post-it tape or washi tape to hold your dies down if that's really where you want it to go, and then run those through. I have a Big Shot, so I run those through my Big Shot. And then once those are cut, I did trim these down a little bit. So I believe these are 3 3/4 by 5. Well, the panel that I'm adding it to is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. So I'm lining that up, kind of trimmed off pieces here and there on how high I wanted everything to be, and lining up where I want that slider piece to be. So that's going to be where my little froggy looks like he's just kind of jumping. I wanted to have him going from lily pad to lily pad, if that's what they're called. That's what I'm going to call them. So while I'm kind of thinking about that, I want to have clouds in my background because I didn't want just a plain white sky above my water line. So I'm taking this mini clouds stencil and just lightly brushing on some Mermaid Lagoon, I believe it was, or Salty Ocean. They're pretty similar in color. Either one would work great. So I just lightly brush on those clouds, lining up my water, making sure that I have enough clouds on there for that, and then just double checking that slider piece. And once I have that kind of situated where I want, I can go ahead and attach that down with some Post-it note tape, and then I can run that through my Big Shot machine. So I'll have that piece there. Now you'll notice since that hole is cut, behind that slider hole it's white. I don't want it white. I want it to blend in with the background. So a couple things you can do. I'm adding ink behind that piece, but you could also actually use that cutout piece that you have from when you die cut that slider out. You could just attach that right back in that slot on that back panel. I just thought this was easier and it covered everything. I kind of got around the whole piece so that if you look at it from the side, you're not seeing any white in there. So I just took my ink and kind of just made sure and double checked that I'm getting enough coverage in there. And I also came in with that faded denim since that's what was at the top of my piece. So it looks like it's all one piece. And then he's jumping in water. And then that background piece is pretty much ready. So now I can move on to the coloring of my Froggies. So this is the Froggy stamp set. A lot of great things on the stamp set. It's really jam-packed. You got some great sentiments, a lot of add-ons you can put that I'll be using on my card too. So I have a couple Froggies here, the lily pads, and some cattails. And I did stamp that lily pad a couple times. Like I said, my original idea was to have one of the frogs would be sitting on the lily pad and the other one would be jumping from one to another, was my original thought. So what I'm doing is I did stamp these out onto Neenah Solar White cardstock, 80 pound. That is just my preferred choice of cardstock that I'm used to coloring on. I know how it works and how it blends, but I also go over my coloring twice to make sure everything blends out good. That's just my personal preference. You do whatever works for you and what you're comfortable with. So I came in and added some shadows behind the head, to the inside of the legs where it would be the darkest, and then right under the head where the arms are coming out, I added a little bit of shadow and then just blended those out with my Copic colors. I will have all of those colors listed down below in the video description and also on my blog. So I just did this real quick. I used the same greens for both frogs. I like to keep mine pretty simple when I don't like to have a million markers spread across my desk. So you'll see I tend to use a lot of the same colors if I can throughout my images or my cards. So for this frog, I added a little bit of shadows to the inside of the eyes or where the eyes pop up, and then just to the edges of the face just to give that some definition, right under the frog head. And then it's really tiny where the legs are, well, the back legs are behind, obviously, his body. So I added a little bit of shading there. So you just kind of have to go in with the tip, very tip of your marker to get those. And so here I'm going to move on to the lily pads. I hope they're called lily pads. That's what I'm calling them. And I added the darkest shading just around a little bit of the edges there. I wasn't sure which lily pad, as far as the jumping, I could have added some shadows if he was going to be jumping from one to another, but I kept it pretty simple. I didn't go into, huge detail on that one. On this one I'm showing you now, I put a big blob of dark color right in the middle. And the reason I'm doing that and blending out is that is the one I want my sitting frog to be on. So he's going to be sitting there. He's going to be casting a shadow onto that lily pad. So that one I really wanted to point out why I added the shadowing there like I did. And I'll just have to keep that in mind when I cut these out and keep that separate so I can attach him to that one because that's the one I want him to be on. And this, excuse me, on this third lily pad, I just did the same coloring as the first, added some shadows just to the outside and blending that out with I typically use a 3-color blend. I don't usually go too far depending on what I'm coloring. So I just go from one to another and blend those out and then back again typically to darken those edges. And I'm just throwing in some green on those cattails. I didn't do any shading on the leaves. And then for the actual cattail itself, I did put my lightest color down first and then just came in with a sliver of dark color. So kept that really simple too. Now there is a coordinating die set for this Froggies stamp set. So I'm going to go ahead and attach those with some thermal web purple tape, which is a great tape to use when you're die cutting or holding things in place. It doesn't rip your paper. It's just tacky enough to hold things down, but not so tacky that it's going to rip. And then I will need to cut that lily pad 3 times. But there is a coordinating die for each of these pieces on the stamp set. So that's a really great thing to have. then I'll just take those and also run these through the Big Shot machine. Really easy to line up, pretty quick and simple. It's a really cute spring summer stamp set. This is a really fun set. So here they are all cut out. And now I can kind of get an idea where things are going to go, how things are going to look. I'm going to go ahead and attach the sitting frog right away so I don't get those lily pads mixed up. And like I said, I was kind of playing off screen a little bit too on where things were going to line up. And I kind of had decided that I'm not going to use those other two lily pads. You really couldn't see them tucked behind the grass. And they were kind of in the way when it came to being a slider. So I'm not going to use those. I'm just going to show that the frog is jumping out of the water, because frogs do that. So I can take my little cattails and I can get those attached right away. Just get those out of my way. I'm just putting a little bit of adhesive at the bottom of them and putting them behind my grass. This card is going to be a couple layers. So I took some foam tape. This is just some 3M foam tape, and added that to my grass. So my grass is going to be popped up. That's going to give room for my slider, so my frog doesn't get caught on those blades of grass. I didn't attach it yet though. I'm just getting that foam tape on there. So I did want to point that out because I still need to put this slider together. So here's my frog, how he's going to look as far as kind of jumping out of the water. And we'll be using, I'm cutting down a really tiny piece of foam tape. And I'm going to use a penny as my slider. So once I get that foam tape kind of trimmed down, I can go ahead and line up where my penny is going to be behind that slider piece. And that still is a little bit too big, so I just come back in and trim that down. You want to make sure that you have a decent enough piece to hold your image or whatever you're going to have as your slider, but you also want it small enough where it's going to fit nicely. It'll slide nicely. So it's just something you kind of have to fiddle with a little bit. This is probably the most tedious part, but they are so worth it. So there's my penny I put behind this panel, line that up and attached my little foam strip. Make sure that's where I want it and push down really good. And you'll see I do end up coming in quite often with my anti-static powder tool, and I'll go along the edges of that foam piece just to kind of take away the stickiness off the edges so that it runs a little smoother. And then I can attach my frog to that foam piece on my penny. And there are a few other products you can use for slider pieces. Penny is just what I had on hand. It was the simplest for me to use. And see, he's kind of catching a little bit. So I'll end up taking that static tool and running across it to kind of loosen that up, get rid of some of that grip along the edges, and have that run a little bit better. There we go. And these are just a really fun card to make. I've given some of these to teachers and they get the biggest charge out of them. You know, even whether it's kids, teachers, everybody, who doesn't love a slider card? They're just so fun to sit and play with, even on your desk when you're kind of just thinking about things. Nice interactive piece to play with. So now to complete the rest of the card, I'm taking some double-sided tape and I doubled it up. So I cut one long strip, doubled that up, and then I'm cutting down the middle of that for some thinner strips. And this is going to go all around this panel with the slider piece on it. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this though is you want to make sure you have enough room for your penny to be sliding. So I added that bottom piece first and trimmed that off. And just going around those edges. I'll also do some in the inside just to make sure it's all nice and stable, flat throughout that back. And then here too, you want to run that along the top, but you want to make sure that it's thin enough where you have room for your penny to slide. And what I did on this piece is I actually took the backing off, because if you take the backing off of your foam strip before you lay it down, it's a lot more flexible. So you can get around those hills or whatever you want to add your foam tape to. So see, I had to trim mine down just a little bit to make sure my penny ran smooth. And then I can just run that long and push that down. And then just adding these random pieces here and there just to make this nice and even throughout, that I'm not going to have any gaps, I guess you could say. But just make sure you leave room for that penny. Otherwise, your froggy won't be able to jump. And then I can take this and attach that to that white panel that I have ready. If you're doing any sentiment stamping on the card itself, make sure you do that before you attach everything. It would be a lot easier if you do. My grass is ready to go, and see, with that foam tape behind the grass, that pushed that grass up a little bit. So it's going to give room for my frog to jump. I just love those little cattails in there. I think they're so cute. We had so many cattails by me when I was growing up. Love them. And so he moves pretty good here. And then I can just kind of finish putting my card together. So I just found some blue piece of cardstock I had in my scrap stash. And that blue piece of cardstock is cut to 4 by 5 1/4, which I'm adding to my card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I stamped this sentiment also from the Froggy stamp set using the banners die also from CC Designs. So that is going to finish up my card. I'm just adding this panel to my card with some double-sided tape to make sure it has a really nice hold. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this card and give these interactive cards a try. They're a lot of fun to make, and people love receiving them. They get the biggest charge out of them, so I'll have all the supplies listed down below in the video description and also on my blog. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next video.